Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome to our spoiler-free review for Invincible Season 4. Leave no one alive. Hello, I'm J-Law, but you can call me Justin. And if you're joining us for the first time, well, we are Geekcentric, a podcast covering the world of movies, TV shows, gaming, and all things Geekcentric. Joining me for today's spoiler-free review is one superhero dude, Mr. Nate Shelton. How are you?
Dude, I'm good. I'm good. I know, we're coming to this a little bit later because we're both a little fallen under the weather. It turns out we are Invincible,
Well,
Very
I was
much
going to say, yes, we are late to this one. The first 3 episodes of Invincible Season 4 are already out. And yeah, I got sick really bad. You got a cold too.
Yeah.
And so sadly, we are not invincible.
There you go.
But we're back.
That's
We're
better.
healthy. We're keeping this completely spoiler free. The first 3 episodes are out. So if you've seen them, that's great. If you haven't, you're waiting to dive in. We're going to talk about them loosey-goosey, but we would love to talk about things like we've really been enjoying about this show, from its look and feel, some of the performances, and the overall story. So we've got you covered. Don't worry. I'm excited to get into it. Should I just get into the synopsis here, Nate? Should I just jump right into it?
Let's hear it. What's going on with Mark?
While the world recovers from catastrophe, a changed Mark fights to protect his home and the people he loves, setting him on a collision course with a threat that could alter the fate of humanity forever. Based on the award-winning comic book series by co-creators Robert Kirkman and Corey Walker, and contributing creator Ryan Ottley, Invincible stars Stephen Yeun, Sandra Oh, and J.K. Simmons, with additional cast including Gillian Jacobs, Seth Rogen, Walton Goggins, Lee Pace, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Jason Mantzoukas, Zazie Beetz, Gray DeLise, Zachary Quinto, Chris Diamantopoulos, Ross McQuan, Carrie Payton, Andrew Rannells, Kevin Michael Richardson, Ben Schwartz, Clancy Brown, Jay Farrow, Mark Hamill, Matthew Reese, Denai Guerrera, and Malise Zhao, including Mr. Peter Cullen,
Come on.
better known as Optimus Prime.
War.
As I mentioned, the first 3 episodes of this season already dropped on March 18th, so you can go watch those right now. New episodes will release every Wednesday, and this is a 8-episode season, if I'm not mistaken. So we've actually seen the first 6 episodes, thanks to our friends at Prime Video Canada for setting us up with these screeners. Again, we apologize for the lateness of this, but hey, we're getting this review out. We're going to start talking about it. Every year, every time we talk about this show, we've probably talked about the animation to death. But the one thing I've always loved about it is just how it is. There's a balance of this clean aesthetic with also this classic superhero style, with also just this brutality. And this season is no different in regards to that. It really does, again, feel comfortable, feels like it's really embracing that. For yourself though, as I said, we've talked about it a lot. Was there anything, Nate, that stood out to you this time around from a look and feel standpoint of the animation and the overall look?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we've talked about it in the past, and I know in the first couple seasons of this show, we were maybe a little more cold than hot on the look. Like, obviously, as you mentioned, like the sort of the classic style, that charm of some of the superhero animated projects that we grew up with is definitely there. And I do think that overall this show has improved on its look and feel. I will say though, and this is something I've noticed quite a bit, and I don't know if it has to do with just things going on in my brain, knowing that now we've moved from not getting the show consistently year after year to now kind of settling into the yearly release, which I'm loving, and I'm very happy because I love the storyline. I love this cast so much. I think it could be a combination of knowing that they have less time between seasons to make them, and also just some of the stuff that they talked about with Seance Dog back in I think it was in the previous season that they brought up stuff with Seance Dog, the creator of Seance Dog, the whole in-universe joke that I thought was hilarious of him pointing out all of the different techniques that they use as animators to save money, to save time. And I think it's one of those things where I loved it at the time, but now watching this season, there's quite a few moments where I'm watching and I'm just like, I'm remembering some of those things, and it does take me out just a little bit here and there. I think, and we'll talk about the cast, we'll talk about the story. I think if the performances and story weren't so phenomenal, I think it would be a little more grating to me. But it was something I noticed this time around of like, oh, okay, I see where they cut costs there, I see where they cut time there, and it's just something that I'm noticing more this season. I don't exactly know why. Again, it could be a combination of the factors of Seance Dog and like that Seance Dog scene and the timeline in terms of when we're getting to this.
But you're talking about when they went to the Comic-Con and they were talking
to
the showrunner and they were the creator and they were talking about how they cut corners and they do things. The reality is that all animated shows do that.
For sure.
You just aren't made aware of it. This is the first time a show has probably drawn.
And I think the association is definitely, affecting my watch of this show going forward. But again, there's so much to the creativity in which how they present these characters that come off the page, that come from the way these characters are written, the way the combat works. Like there is a lot to love still that we've talked and adored in previous reviews, and you can go back and listen to those if you want to hear all of those thoughts. But
because as you were mentioning before, it's like, maybe we've been hot and cold. I've always been really hot on the animation. I'm not sure if I'm misremembering, but I've always loved the animation. I think that it does take it knows when to be simplistic and more reserved when it needs to be in those sort of, I guess, personal moments where it's just characters talking, and then it knows how to really ramp things up and give you, more of a 3D, in situation experience with the fighting and the intensity of the fights that feels very reminiscent of anime like Dragon Ball and all of these things, right? So there's this sort of homogenous, this sort of, I guess, like creative, this visual style from all different types of animated superhero shows that we love, from the more classic stuff, from the more action oriented stuff that feels present. But to your point, yes, like I think it is a lot more apparent now that they have made it apparent to us as the audience that this is how they are cutting corners, or they're saving on time. And the reality is like I said, there's a lot of animated shows that do that. There's a lot of animated shows that do that we watch, that we enjoy, that we probably don't take into consideration as much. But because this show has obviously pointed it out, it's gonna stand out a little bit more. And I think it's bound to. But I still appreciate the fact that they were so honest and transparent with it. There is a specific scene that I think that really stands out, and it's all I'll say is it's a dinner table scene. And that was where it felt very like it was just an easy sort of cut and paste of specific elements together.
But I think the music and the gravitas of what that scene means for these characters, it pulls you back in, right? Like I think that's the juxtaposition of what I'm trying to get across, right? So,
for sure, absolutely. Yeah. So I think, I still think the animation is top notch. They've definitely they've found their comfort in their own visual style that they're able to kind of settle into. And again, the action is insane. Cool. So, but before we start talking about the story elements and some of that action, let's talk about the performances, because this cast is stacked. We've talked about our main characters quite a bit over the last little while. Why don't I throw to you? Is there someone outside of the main characters that really stood out to you as being either a welcomed addition or someone that's just kind of taking center stage that you're really enjoying?
Well, this season, we're we'll talk about it in story again, I know, but we are getting to a place where a sort of, I think the show sets up a lot. There's a lot of setups for various different plot lines and characters, and so much is sort of coming at you. And I remember that was a thing we talked about last season, was it just felt like there was just so much going on. And this season, it does feel like we are at times more focused, at times a little less focused, but at least when it comes to sort of the main focus of the storyline of Mark's story and the story of the Viltrumites, I have to talk about Lee Pace as Thrag in this show. He was recently, I think Brandon Davis did a panel with the Invincible folks. I'm pretty sure it was at that panel that he introduced Lee Pace as Grand Regent Thrag. And, I'm a huge fan of Foundation. We've covered Foundation for quite some time, and Lee Pace in that show, Lee Pace in anything, is just incredible. But he has such a phenomenal presence with, when you see him come onto the screen, just in his, with his face and with his voice. And here we just have his voice, but that performance is right there. You get all of that. And in a show that includes Peter Cullen as sort of an equal sort of entity within the show when it comes to like the gravitas of their characters. It's awesome to see. I think that's the biggest thing, and we'll talk about obviously about more of this cast, but the cast is just incredibly stacked for this show, and it always has been. But it's I should be used to names like Lee Pace joining and not thinking too much of it, but I'm not. Even 4 seasons in, I'm still like blown away by just how phenomenal all of these people are, and he gives a phenomenal performance for what we see of him in these first 6 episodes.
Sure, yeah, he's. I will say this: we haven't gotten enough of him in the first 6 episodes, but
sure.
when he is on screen, he definitely commands the scene.
Yeah,
and I think it has a lot to do with the gravitas to his character of who Thrag is, and the Viltrumite War that's coming, and so on and so forth. So, all things to be considered. But to your point, to have someone of such a status, that presence that Lee Pace has, perfect casting for the character. Like I think, like you were saying, this cast is always stacked. They're always delivering. I'm trying to think of like the newcomers that what really stood out to me. You mentioned Peter Cullen. I think he's absolutely fantastic. We're getting a lot more of him and understanding a lot more of his backstory, which I genuinely appreciate. But I'm also just gonna go back to one of the OGs, and that's J.K. Simmons. The character journey for Nolan has been complicated, has been very interesting. I think we're seeing a character that is very much ready to make peace with what he's done, but is also trying to find a way to figure out how to make peace, save what he still loves, while also not abandoning his identity and his culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he's in a very conflicted place, and to see that kind of unfold, and the way J.K. Simmons kind of embraces that in his voice at times to time, it really does highlight the sort of the nuanced performance that he's giving in a lot of ways in this character, because he's a much different Nolan from season 1, and
Absolutely.
you really do see it, and obviously that goes without saying given the events that have happened over 4 seasons. But he's outstanding in this, and I'm really I'm rooting for him, and I love that.
And it's also interesting too, and this might be slightly into story, but we're seeing these characters at different points in their arcs when it comes to being broken completely to finding ways to pick themselves back up. And I think Mark Grayson, Steven Yeun, this is the most broken we've ever seen, and you see that in the title sequence throughout this season of like the Invincible title sequence that we know and love, but little pieces chipping away, and that very much is a lot of the characters this season. But to your point, someone like Nolan and the way that J.K. Simmons is presenting him, we're seeing him not fully fixed by any means, but at a different place when it comes to the overall sort of healing journey of these characters. And Mark is not in that place. He is getting to the breaking point this season. I think another character that I would mention as well, who we're seeing going through quite a bit of changes, is Jillian Jacobs, Samantha Eve Wilkins, Adam Eve. I think we're seeing a really interesting dynamic shift with her. I think we get, at least within these first 6 episodes, feels like we're getting a little bit less of her. It does feel like the character is sort of on the back end a little bit, but the developments that are going on with her are incredibly intriguing. And I think one of the nice things with this show is it utilizes not just that mental trauma, but also the physical trauma that can happen to these characters from season to season. And if you remember what happened to Adam Eve in the previous season with her in Conquest, let's just say we are seeing ramifications of that, and I'm very intrigued to see where they take it.
Yeah, I was actually going to say I'm surprised with how much they've given Adam Eve this season. Just because like they really have kind of leaned into understanding how the relationship between Mark and Samantha is, like how it's shaping them, together, but then also as individuals. And I enjoy that aspect of it because it does show the level of maturity for these characters to be growing up in this world. But also, like, to your point, the developments that are happening, the sort of PTSD that she's dealing with throughout this season, it does take center stage, and kind of showcase what can happen when you are, a superhero, and I guess you're not necessarily dealing with everything, all at once. So,
and I will just say, just to that point, what you brought up, them together as a couple, we do get a decent amount of that. You're right. I just think comparative to last season, it's a significant drop off in terms of how much of just Adam Eve's story we're getting. Again, this very much does feel like we're getting hints of what she's going through on her own, right, within these first 6 episodes, but there is a lot more of her and Mark, and that dynamic
sure.
of running Invincible Inc. and kind of him having to kind of work alongside her, and her sort of both of them getting to a place where they can balance being together, but also him being invincible.
Sure. But when you talk about balance, it is interesting to think about how many characters are in this show, and honestly, how balanced it all feels. It sometimes, like, it does feel like, not everyone is getting a singular episode, but everyone's involved, right? Like there's a story, there's something going on for these characters in the background, or and whatnot. And I think that's what this show's always done really, really well, is been able to kind of, bring all of these characters in when they need to, at specific points, and when it's relevant and when it's not. There might be some characters like the Guardians that don't necessarily get featured as much, but they are featured. Do you know what I mean? And so it is really a show that is, called Invincible, and that is, yes, centered around our main character, but this world that Invincible lives in, and these characters that are there, they're all super important, and it shows. Like, I love that this show knows how to kind of treat each character, give them their attention when they need to, but then also, pull them back and bring in another character to the forefront. So I enjoy that aspect of it. I think it mixes the pool really, really well.
Yeah, and I think the cast and the performances, I think are to me, I would put them sort of at the top, even above some of the elements with the story. But I wanted to mention Oliver Grayson. We're getting a lot more Oliver, even more than last season. And I think Christian Convery does a really good job. Like, he's a solid sort of angsty teenager, right? Oliver grows up. At first, when we see Oliver this season, I was like, oh, did we get a time jump? And then I remembered, oh no, wait. He grows at a rapid pace, and so he's drinking coffee now. He's he's mouthing off.
I think he mentions that, though. I think he mentioned that too, right? He was like, I think there was something in regards to like the friends I had so and so like a couple months
It got
ago or something like
weird.
that.
Yes.
Yeah,
It
because
got
he's like
weird.
he's so much older, right?
Yeah.
So like he is growing a lot faster, which shows. And
Yeah.
yeah, to your point, you were getting a lot more of him, and we're in the teenage years of Oliver by the sounds of it, right?
Yeah. I just wanted to also shout out Sandra Oh.
Oh, so good.
There's specifically, and you'll get to it when you get to it, but there's one moment this season that is just give her the Emmy, because it's insane how, like, again, like, obviously we champion animation on the Geekcentric podcast. There's no, we've always said like it is another medium to tell stories, but in terms of another medium to give performances, and again, I mentioned earlier, like, even the animation of this show, I enjoy so many aspects about it. It isn't necessarily my favorite type of animation. The level of emotion that we get through this performance from Sandra Oh is just, it's, again, I mean, we've talked about it in so many other seasons, but it's just, she's so good. She's
Yeah,
so
she's
good,
great.
this show. Yeah.
Yeah, she helps to give the whole series a sense of humanity.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, even though that's really kind of found in aspects of Mark's journey,
Mm-hmm.
you see how he's conflicted with understanding his origins while also still being human and what's right and what's wrong. So there's a different aspect of how we experience humanity through his character.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always seen Debbie as the anchor of humanity for the show, but also for Mark, right? Like that is his center point, his mom. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I think, again, Sandra Oh always delivers, just like J.K. Simmons. Just the attention to how to emote through your voice in a way that is compelling, that feels authentic, and that, to your point, is just as strong as it would be in a live action than it would be in animation. It translates really, really well,
Yeah.
and I think, yeah, she's one of the best. I'm just going to shout out Seth Rogen. We
Come
get a
on.
lot more Alan,
A lot
and
more.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love seeing Seth Rogen or hearing Seth Rogen.
Seth Rogen coming out of like a Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson body too.
Body,
right?
yeah, like it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but yeah, he's absolutely fantastic. And again, like he adds the comedic levity that you would want in the right places while also being extremely serious and sometimes hard to take serious because he's trying to be tough. But
Yeah.
but that's what makes it fun. And yeah, I'm just glad that we're getting a lot more of him, and especially him and Nolan being like sort of sidekicks, you know what I mean, and
Yeah.
like partners. So, and him trying to bring the best out of Nolan, and I think it's softening Nolan a lot, right?
Mhm.
So I love that Seth or Alan, played by Seth Rogen, is that character for Nolan. So
Absolutely.
it's good stuff.
There's
Lots
one
of other
more,
characters.
There's one
Yeah.
more I'm going to mention before we go on, because we literally could talk about all of them for hours. But
I feel like we have.
I know, but I will just say, and there's not really much we can say about the character, but when you get to it, I just want to shout out Zoe Deutsch for being probably my favorite addition to this series in a while. Yeah, that's all we really can say, other than just like she gets some time with Alan, and it's great. Like, again, I think you put Seth Rogen in a scene with anybody, and it's going to be a better scene. It's going to be a more fun adventure. So yeah, that's all I'll say.
Yeah, definitely a welcome addition to this season. But yeah, there's tons of people. There's a lot of we didn't leave anyone because it's like, they're not worth talking about. It's just in this moment, sort of impressions, who stood out to us.
Yeah.
And I think we've kind of nailed that. Let's move into story. Like we mentioned, we've seen the first 6 episodes, but the first 3 episodes are out now, and the fact that they launched all 3 of those episodes on the same day is great, because I think it is, each episode is a sort of foundation building episode. We have 2 episodes on Earth, 1 and 3, and we have 1 in space with Nolan, catching up with Mark in the first episode to help kind of understand where he's at mentally, understanding where Nolan's at in the second episode. There's just a lot that the first 3 episodes gives that sets up for the next 3 leading into the 6th episode. But what I really like is how the show doesn't just escalate. It's building towards things. There's these little things that are happening throughout, but like there's always just this clear focus on consequences,
Mm-hmm.
and everything that's happened in previous seasons still matter, and you can feel those ripple effects throughout the episodes. And I love that. I love that they pay attention to that, and at the same time the world is expanding. We're seeing threats, new dynamics, and then hints of something that is obviously so much bigger on the horizon, which is what this whole season's been touted as, is this sort of Viltrumite war, the big arc in the comic books that we're finally getting in this animated series. So it feels like it's that classic Invincible balance where it's like the personal stakes mixed with the universe level chaos that
Mm-hmm.
we know. And I'm here for it. I think it's hitting all the marks for me, at least. There's probably one episode that I think we're probably a little not hot on, but for the most part, those episodes where they tend to deviate, I kind of enjoy at times.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's hitting all the marks. I see what you did there. Nice. I think this season, I overall, in these first 6 episodes at least, I can already tell that I'm enjoying it more than even last season. I liked last season. I've liked all the seasons of the show, but I think
last season was 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's got one of the highest scores. It is the most watched animated show for Amazon.
That's amazing.
The most watched. So it's like it's incredible.
Yeah, it's Invincible. But I think I think this season I actually like more personally. I think it's I think there's so much to it that feels more consistent. And to your point, yes, there are still setups. Yes, there are still moments where certain setups kind of come to their payoff, and maybe it doesn't feel as big. And when it comes to sort of some of the side stuff, I think the end of the first episode, it hit from a character standpoint, but it didn't hit from like an overarching sort of big bad standpoint. And again, I know that this show and this universe, it has those sort of smaller things, to your point, to add those consequences, to flesh out these characters in ways that make them sort of have to question their morals. And I love that. I think from a character building standpoint, that works sometimes more than from an overall story standpoint. But I think this season is more consistent with the exception of episode 4, which by the time you're listening to this, I think is out on the next day or so, or maybe 2 days from then. But basically, episode 4 very much is a bottleneck episode, and we've had those before in Invincible, but I've always been more delighted by them. I think this episode was intriguing. I think it was like sort of, there were fun moments to it. I think the music's excellent, but overall, the episode, just at the end of it, I sort of felt like it did feel kind of like a waste of time. And I understand that it's probably a setup to get to another moment where a character has to make a decision and we question their morality. I understand that it's probably like another sort of sequid situation. But it just feels like there are better ways to do that. And I do think that episode 2 this season is probably one of my favorites of the first 6 episodes that we've watched. Just in the sense that we do get to take a step away from Mark's story and hone in on Nolan and Alan, like you said, going on this sort of side adventure, and specifically getting to see the Viltrumite backstory. I think was awesome. So yeah, I think if we're gonna take some time away from our main story, I'd like it to feel a little more relevant and a little less like the in-universe joke or the in-show joke of what we were talking, the Mummy, or is that what his name is? He the Mummy guy? Like a little less of that would be fine by me. But no, I think overall this story does feel more consistent.
I think there's a huge importance to what's going on in episode 4 that's going
Yeah,
to set up for something that's probably after all of this this Viltrumite war business. But you talked about how episode 2 kind of deviates from the main story. I would argue that it doesn't. It's just telling us the other side of that story.
sure.
You know what I mean? So it's not really a deviation from Mark's story, because that's very much tied to the decisions that Mark is going to need to make, or even just who he is
Mhm.
as a character. But yes, absolutely, episode 4 is a bottleneck episode. It is a huge deviation from the
Just
entire
feels out of
storyline.
place. It feels out of
It
place
it
to
does, but
me.
again, I
Yeah.
think I think that there's one of those episodes in every single season, and I think maybe for this one, what it was giving us just wasn't nearly as interesting, maybe. But
Yeah.
like I was saying, I think for us, as and maybe we should make this clear. We're 4 seasons into the show. We never read the comics. We don't know the
That's
arcs. We
true.
don't know all of the stories.
So that episode
There,
could be huge for some people. Yeah.
right, and
Yeah.
that episode could also be something that is hinting at something much larger,
Mhm.
that will take place after, a that could be season 5, that could be something else. So there is something there. But that said, I think some of the voice performances that episode were really great.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of
And
course.
I'm interested to see when it does come out in a couple days, what people think, and what they have to say about it. Yeah, like you mentioned your favorite episode of 3, because this is how I was going to kind of wrap things up.
Yeah.
You've mentioned your favorite episode of the first of the first 6 episodes. Why don't we do it this way? You've mentioned your first episode for your favorite episode of the first 3.
Mhm.
How about the 3 that audiences haven't seen? We know you don't. You
We
weren't a
know
big
it's not
fan of
episode
number
4.
4, right? Exactly. Of those, which of the other 2, which one are you excited for audiences to see?
Yeah, it's got to be episode 6. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where that episode feels very much like it feels like a almost like a halfway point, if you will. It feels like a point of things are actually going down. We're actually seeing. It's so tough to talk about. We're seeing this thing start to really kick off, is what I will say. And that is so rewarding after the first 5 episodes, or the first at least 4 that actually are contributing to this storyline, that make me feel like it's an event episode. It does feel like one of those, you know tune in, if this was still on cable television, this would be a big one that people would have to tune in for. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed episode 6. How about yourself?
Yeah, I was gonna say episode 6 is the one for me as well.
Yeah.
Without getting into spoilers, it feels like the episode where everything is starting to click. The
Mhm.
action, the characters, moments, the tension, everything is just coming to that specific boiling point, if you will. It just
Mhm.
all comes together in a really satisfying way, and everything that you've been kind of working towards through the 5 episodes before episode 6 really make it worthwhile to see it all just kind of click together. So yeah, I'm with you. It's episode 6 as well. Um, as we kind of get to the end here, I know, like, we've kind of talked about all of the ins and outs of characters, and the story beats, and so on and so forth, of what we're excited for. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
I think it's you know what I think it's one of those things where I'm so intrigued to see where this is going. I think the stories that Robert Kirkman and the way that Simon Rachopia, like the way that they are presenting them, the way that they're sort of consistently delivering these concepts that are so intriguing. Yeah, I'm really intrigued to see where they go with it. And so far, 4 seasons in, I don't feel the way that I did about some of the later stuff in The Walking Dead. Right. And I'm happy about that. I'm happy that it doesn't feel like, we're at a place yet where this stuff is overplayed, that I'm tired of these characters. I think a huge part of that, again, comes back to these incredible performances, this incredible cast. But I would say, yeah, I'm very intrigued to see where it goes, and what could possibly be after what I'm imagining, is at the end of this season. I'm looking forward to seeing how it all fleshes out, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think overall we're 3 episodes in, and we've seen the other 3 episodes, but the season feels like a very strong return. It's bigger in the right ways, it's more confident, and it still hits the perfect balance between the emotional storytelling with the absolutely wild superhero chaos that you would expect from this world. And if you're already a fan of the show, you're going to feel right at home with this season. I think you're going to enjoy it so much, especially if you're a fan of the comic books. I feel like you will. And if you're somebody who's just waiting to jump in, I think now's the time to do it. Do you know what I mean? Like if you haven't been really into the whole idea of what Invincible is, like what they're building towards is really great. Obviously you would need to go back and watch like the other seasons, but that said, like they're a good watch. And I feel like what this season is doing is really building off of everything that's happened really well from previous seasons. And it is very much it is for the fans who love the show, right? So I'm definitely down to see more. I'm stoked for when we get to episode 7 and 8, and cannot wait for that. All right, well, that is our spoiler-free review for Invincible season 4. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, and you've watched the first 3 episodes, you want to let us know your own thoughts, please feel free to write into us at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. You can also hit us up on Twitter at geekcentricyt, and you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at wearegeekcentric. Keep in mind, we have a ton of great episodes out for you right now, including some fantastic interviews from the cast and crew of Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Had the opportunity to chat with Charlie Cox, Vincent D'Onofrio, Dario Scardapain, and Sana Amanat. Those are available on podcast feeds and on YouTube at youtube.com/geekcentric. Our spoiler-free review for Daredevil Born Again Season 2 is out now as well, so go give that a listen. The show is a absolute banger. We loved it. Stoked for more people to watch it. It feels like a return to the Daredevil that we know and love. We got a lot more coming up, including some Super Mario Galaxy, as well as some more interviews and some more animation with Maul Shadowlord around the corner. Things are going to get dark. They're going to get scary.
They're going to get Darth.
Here for it. They're going to get Darth. That's a good one. I missed that joke. That was a great.
You're welcome.
But be sure to subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Nate, thank you so much for joining me for this very, very quick and sadly late, but grateful that we got the review done for Invincible Season 4. And as we say,
love ya.
Peace.